In this video, I am going to explain you how to use parameters and arguments for functions. Here I have used the same program that I used for the previous video. When we run this program, it first asks to enter length and width. This is for calculating area of the rectangle, and we enter, it will again ask for length and width. Therefore, I am going to give 15 and 10 again. And this is for calculating perimeter of the rectangle. When you look at this program, here we have enter length twice, and both the time we have used the same value because we wanted to calculate the area and perimeter of the same rectangle. And also I have used the same width, which is 10 here and here, because again we are going to use the same rectangle to calculate both area and perimeter. Now let's see how we can modify this program without these unnecessary repetitions. When we look at this calculate area function, it needs length and width to calculate the area value. And also when we look at this calculate perimeter function, there also it needs length and width values to calculate the perimeter. Therefore, when we look at both of these functions, both the functions need length and width to calculate area and perimeter. Therefore, both these functions have this set of statements to input those values. Here from line number 8 to 11 is used to prompt and input length and width. And here also from line number 21 to 24 is used to input the values length and width to calculate perimeter. Therefore, every time we call calculate area function, it will prompt to input length and width values, and whenever we access calculate perimeter function, again it will ask to input length and width values. Therefore, to eliminate repetitions, I am going to remove these 4 lines from this function, and also I am going to remove the same set of lines from this function. Now, our calculate area function will have double length, width and area variables, and it has the calculation part and the return statement. But here we have not mentioned from where these length and width values will receive. And here also when we look at this calculate perimeter function, again now we have the variable length, width and perimeter, and we have the equation to calculate perimeter and the return statement, but again we do not have any statements about how these length and width values will be received. This is the place where we need parameters. If you want to pass any values to a function, then you can use parameters. Functions may have no parameters or multiple parameters. In these two functions, we don't have any parameters because there's nothing between the parentheses of calculate area function or calculate perimeter function. Therefore, to pass data to these functions, we will have to add new parameters. When you are adding parameters, first you have to mention the data type. I'm going to use double. And then the parameter name, I'm going to use r length to obtain length value. And again, I'm going to use the parameter double r width to obtain width value to this calculate perimeter function. Similarly, to calculate area function also, I'm going to use same parameters. Now both the functions have 2 parameters each. When we look at this calculate area function, here we have double r length and double r width as its parameters. And here also, for calculate perimeter function, we have r length and rWidth parameters. Both of these are of double data type. The meaning of having these parameters is it is going to receive two double values when it is called. Now let's see how we can use these parameter values within the function. The values we receive to these functions will be length and width values, and these length and width values are used to calculate area and perimeter. According to our previous program, if we want to calculate area of the rectangle, we multiplied length and width values input from the keyboard. But now we don't have any keyboard input statements here. Instead, we have received those values via these parameters. Therefore, I'm going to remove this length and width value from this place. And then to calculate area, I'm going to use r length into r width. Therefore, whatever the value we receive to this r length variable will be multiplied by r width, and then the calculated value will be stored in area variable. Similarly, to calculate perimeter, we are going to add r length and r width together and multiply it by 2, and therefore we don't need this length and width variables anymore. Now the structure of our calculate area function and the calculate perimeter functions have changed. Here we have parameters. Therefore, now we can't just use calculate area with empty parentheses. Instead, we have to set some arguments to be passed to the relevant function. For an example, if I'm going to pass length 15 and width 10, I can pass these values from here as 15, 10. And these are called arguments. Now the calculate area function call contains two arguments. First argument is number 15 and the second argument is number 10. Therefore, when we execute this function call, it will assign number 15 to r length and it will assign number 10 to r width. And therefore, the area will be calculated by multiplying number 15 and number 10, because now our length is 15 and our width is 10. If I change these values, for an example, if I change this to 150 and here if I change this to 100, then when we call this calculate area function, again our length will be 150 and our width will be 100. I'm going to keep it as 15 and 10, and similarly to the calculate perimeter function also we can pass the same arguments. Now let's run the program and see how this works. Here area is calculated as 150, perimeter is 50 and the total is 200. In this time we haven't used any keyboard input. Instead, we have hard-coded the values 15 and 10. Let's see how we can use keyboard input. Now our task is to use keyboard input values rather than these hard-coded values. To do that, we will have to input the values length and width before calling the relevant functions. First of all, I am going to create two variables to store length and width. The data type is double length and width. And then I am going to display the message cout enter length and then I'm going to use cin and store the input value to length variable. Thereafter I'm going to display in the width message enter width and then I'm going to use cin and store the value in width variable. Now I have input the length and width values from the keyboard and stored those values within length and width variables. Now instead of passing these direct values, I can use length here and width here. Similarly, here also I'm going to use length, and here I'm going to use width. Now when we call the function like this will call calculate area function, and it will pass the value of length variable and width variable to the calculate area function. Similarly, when we have calculate perimeter function, it is going to pass the value of length variable and width variable to the calculate perimeter function. Now let's run the program and see how this works. Now it prompts to enter length. I'm going to give 15 and I'm going to give width as 10, and the results are printed. Area is 150, perimeter is 50, and the total value is 200. Therefore, keep in mind, if you want to pass some data to a function, you can use parameters. And there can be 0 or many parameters for a function. If you are mentioning parameters, you will have to mention those parameters within the parentheses of the function. And you can mention any number of parameters and any data type you wish to. Another important fact you have to keep in mind is when you are calling a function, the number of arguments you are going to use and the data type of those arguments should always match with the parameters you have mentioned in your function. For an example, if you have only one parameter within the function, then when you call the function, you will have to use only one argument. If the data type is something else other than double, then the data type of the arguments should have to be matched with the relevant data type.